The sky hadn't fully brightened when I heard the megaphone. You are surrounded. Step out of your house, hands above your head, unarmed. I was standing on the front porch, left hand clutching a cup of black coffee I hadn't even sipped, right hand scratching my belly. My eyes stung from the morning mist, feet bare, wearing nothing but flannel pajama pants. I stood frozen, staring down the red dirt road leading up to Juniper Hill, and saw something no one should see at dawn. 4 police cars arranged in a V shape, blocking the entrance to my farm. Flashing red and blue lights, radios crackling, and a megaphone blaring like a war zone checkpoint. Behind each car, an officer in a black tactical vest, guns trained on me, a black man standing on his own land, not even wearing shoes. Step off the porch, now! A woman's voice boomed. I didn't move. Instead, I took a sip of coffee. Bitter, strong, necessary. I muttered under my breath, God damn, these people got the wrong house. The eastern sky still held a veil of fog. The roosters hadn't finished crowing, and the dogs were still lazing under the barn. Everything here on this land was supposed to be peaceful. But not now. One of the officers stepped away from his post, slowly approaching the gate. And then I saw her, standing ramrod straight, arms crossed, wearing a moss-green blouse with a gleaming brass badge. Gloria Hensley, President, Timberline Estates, HOA. Around her neck hung a string of fake pearls. Behind her, a white golf cart parked by the roadside, the kind only rich, bored folks drive around to complain about lawn heights. I sighed. No way. Gloria smiled, the kind of smile Southerners call the grin of someone who's never had to fetch water, but always complains your sink's dirty. Good morning, Mr. Rourke, she said, as if borrowing a cup of salt, not summoning a SWAT team to someone's doorstep. My name is Calvin Rourke, 62 years old, brown skin, goatee, 10 years as a construction contractor in Houston before moving here, Timberline County, Texas, to live like a man should. I don't like cities. I don't like neighbors who say, sorry, but you're violating Clause 6.2. And I really don't like HOAs, homeowners associations, those semi-legal gangs that control people's lives with rule books thicker than Vatican law. That's why I bought this land, 17 acres of red dirt, juniper trees scattered across the hills, papers clean, non-HOA registered, triple-checked by my lawyer, Darren Clay. I came here to reclaim the land my grandfather was forced off in 1963 when the local government took it for public use and sold it to a new white neighborhood. This land I'm standing on isn't part of any HOA. Never was. Never will be. Yet here I am surrounded by cops because... What? We received an anonymous tip that you're storing explosives in the South Shed, an officer said, hand resting lightly on his gun. He looked at me like I was hiding a bomb behind the passion fruit vines. I tilted my head, looking back. The wind rustled the grass. Morning sparrows hopped along the wire fence. In the distance was my shed, home to a generator, a couple of propane tanks, and an old chainsaw. That? It's what I use to grill BBQ and mow the lawn. No one laughed. I glanced at Gloria. She stood there, smile unchanged, like she was watching a midday soap opera. I know her type. The kind who says, I'm not racist, but... And the next sentence is always a slur. Mr. Rourke, we need permission to search the shed. The officer continued, sounding less tense after seeing I wasn't flipping out or pulling a gun. I'm not the hot-headed type, but I'm not the pushover type either. I nodded, finishing my coffee. I'll open the gate, but if you break any doors, I'm charging you. I walked slowly down the porch steps. Gravel crunched under my feet. Hands raised, coffee cup nearly empty. One of my dogs, Gravy, a shepherd mix, ran out from the kennel, barked a few times, then went quiet, sitting by the fence like a guard. 3 officers followed me, 2 stayed back. I opened the wooden gate and led them to the shed. They searched every corner. I stood outside, arms crossed, silent. When the 3rd officer came out, his eyes flickered with confusion. Nothing but a lawnmower, a chainsaw, and 2 propane tanks for grilling. "Well, damn. Must be some explosive BBQ," I said, half smiling. No one responded, but their eyes shifted. From suspicion to embarrassment. Because they knew. They'd been called out on a wild goose chase. I turned to Gloria. For the first time this morning, her smile faltered. Her lips tightened, eyes darting elsewhere. "So, Mrs. Hensley? Want to search my fridge too?" I called out. "Or check if my shoes are too close to the porch line?" Silence. The youngest officer stepped toward me. "Mr. Rourke, we're sorry for the inconvenience. We're just following protocol." I nodded. "I get it, but I've got my own protocol." I turned to Gloria. "And my protocol is this. If someone calls cops to my land without a damn good reason, they're going to court." Her face paled slightly. Not much, but enough for me to notice. When the police left, Gloria lingered for a moment. Finally, she spoke, just loud enough for me to hear. "This community has standards. You can choose not to follow them, but that doesn't mean you're untouchable." I stepped closer. Just a wooden fence between us. Looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't live in Timberline Estates. I didn't sign your papers. I don't get your mail. I'm not under your thumb." "But you're right on the boundary," she said, her eyes sharpening. "And that boundary is legal." I shot back. "Not your preference, not your race, not your shiny blonde control fantasy." She got in her golf cart without another word. Reversed. Dust kicked up. I stood there, coffee cold in my hand. Calvin Rourke has lived through 6 decades, 2 economic crashes, 1 oil war, and a lifetime of being asked, "You sure you live in this neighborhood?" Every time he walked into a quiet suburb with his brown skin and straw hat, he doesn't get angry at those questions anymore. Anger wears thin when you live long enough. Now, he just remembers. Every glance, every frown, every whispered comment as if he couldn't hear. He holds it all in his chest, like the fine dirt under his nails from gardening. Not clean, but real. The morning after the siege, Calvin sat in front of a land map on his kitchen wall. An old map. Eucalyptus frame faded, hand-drawn coordinates, red ink outlining property lines like veins across Juniper Hill. At the center, an oval plot, underlined twice. Rourke Acres, Est, 1902. "This was my grandfather's land," Calvin said softly, as if speaking to the departed. Flashback. 1963. Calvin was 1 year old when Samuel Rourke, his grandfather, was forced off the land his family had held for nearly 70 years. The official reason in the records: new public road development for Timberline East. The new neighborhood naturally was all white. Samuel, a hay and black-eyed pea farmer, didn't know much about law, but he knew this land was his. Deeds clear, taxes paid. Yet one morning, bulldozers showed up. 10 days later, his family was pushed behind a temporary fence. No apologies, no compensation. No one listened to his story. They don't need a reason to take land. Cal, his grandfather once said when Calvin was old enough to understand. They just need papers, and they always find a way to rewrite the papers. 40 years later, back from the dust, Calvin swore he'd never return to Timberline. After high school, he enlisted, then worked as a welder, later starting a construction company in San Antonio. He lived a working man's life: steel dust, sweat, government contracts. Not bad, not rich. But at 58, his heart started rebelling. A hospital stay for high blood pressure made him rethink his entire life. After his wife died of pancreatic cancer, Calvin had no reason to stay in the city. His only son, Rodney, moved to Colorado with his wife and 2 kids. Calvin didn't blame him. Rodney grew up urban, knew nothing about herding cattle or the smell of fresh grass after rain. Calvin just wanted a quiet place. A place to call home ground. Not rented, not mortgaged. No one's permission needed to paint the door red or plant corn among the flowers. The land returns. He found this place through a local paper ad. 17.2 acres, rural land, 1.5 miles from timberline, non-HOA, clean title. Direct sale. Calvin called immediately. The seller was a German widow, living alone, planning to move to Oregon with her daughter. "Wasn't a Mr. Rourke here once?" she asked. Calvin nodded. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You should take it back." Lawyer Darren Clay, the land keeper. Before signing anything, Calvin called his old friend Darren Clay, a civil rights lawyer, Comanche native, known for suing HOAs in Texas. Darren once got an HOA in Frisco dissolved for discriminatory land zoning. "No move without checking the papers," Darren said, half joking. "Land here ain't like coffee. Cal, if you don't own it right, they'll steal it while you're sleeping." Darren triple-checked the records, county files, zoning maps, HOA exemptions, notarized deeds from 1997. Everything confirmed Rourke Acres was HOA-free. The first days Calvin started from scratch, by hand. Every fence post, every shovelful of dirt. He built a new chicken coop, planted 6 green apple trees, installed solar panels above the shed, and put up a wooden sign. Rourke Acres, ancestral land, not for sale. He went to bed with crickets chirping, woke to roosters, no car horns, no community loudspeakers, no neighbors telling him to mow the lawn every Monday. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his, and he thought it would stay calm. Until the buzzing started. At first, it was just a small drone, white, flying low, quiet. It passed by and vanished. Calvin thought it was kids. But when it showed up 3 mornings in a row, same time, same spot, he knew it wasn't a prank. On the 4th day, he grabbed his air rifle and shot it down near the water trough. Not the first time he'd shot something, but the first time he saw a camera in its eye. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. The first meeting with the HOA queen. Gloria Hensley, tall, wearing a green shirt with the HOA logo on the chest, name tag, smiling like she was selling life insurance. "Are you the new resident? Welcome to Timberline Estates." Calvin opened the door, hands still caked with dirt. "I don't live in Timberline Estates." "Oh, you must be mistaken. Your land borders our managed area, and we'd love to invite you to our new resident orientation." She handed him a canvas bag with the HOA logo. Inside, Calvin found a community behavior handbook, a temporary violation list, a notice of monthly membership fees automatically applied to adjacent area residents, a flyer stating HOA culture is civilized progress. Calvin looked at her. No smile. "I think you're trying to sell me something I ain't buying." First time listed. Less than a week later, he got a fine. Visual pollution. Unregistered reflective objects. Solar panels. The next week, another. Noise violation. Roosters exceeding permitted decibel levels in the morning. Calvin flipped through his land records. Not a single line mentioned HOAs. No noise clauses. No restrictions beyond county and federal law. He called Darren. Darren chuckled. Gloria's pulling the old trick. Creating reality with paperwork. If you don't push back, the paper becomes law. His grandfather's words echoed. They don't need to be right. They just need you to stay quiet. Calvin wasn't staying quiet. He installed more cameras, reinforced the fence with taller recycled wood, posted a sign, private property, non-HOA land. Trespassers will be documented and prosecuted. He sat on his old wooden porch chair, sipped black coffee, and looked out at Juniper Hill, where his grandfather once took him to pick wild berries, telling stories of ancestors chased off their land 4 times before. And he knew this was just getting started. Since Gloria Hensley's friendly visit as Timberline Estates' HOA president, Calvin Rourke checked his mailbox with a new mindset, no longer expecting utility bills, grandkids' cards, or organic veggie ads, just hoping those damn warning letters would stop showing up. But life doesn't give you what you hope for. Monday, a letter arrived. Warning: unapproved planting. Non-native species may cause soil erosion. They meant the okra bushes he planted from seeds his mother brought from Louisiana in 1947. Thursday, a note slipped under the door. Porch light on past 10 p.m. Violation of Timberline lighting standards. And Sunday, a soft knock at 6 a.m. Calvin opened the door. Silent. A guy about 30, gelled hair, cream-colored HOA polo. Voice sweet as honey slathered in Vaseline. Morning, Mr. Rourke. I'm Trevor, HOA Environmental Coordinator. I'm authorized to invite you to this week's resident orientation. Calvin pointed to the sign by the door. Private land HOA not recognized here. Trespassers will be photographed. Trevor's smile twisted. He handed over a thin plastic folder containing another community behavior handbook. Calvin took it, opened it, and pulled out a pre-printed A4 sheet. Refusal to join HOA does not recognize HOA authority. He slipped it into the folder. Take this back to your boss and tell her. This land ain't hers. Never was. Never will be. Trevor opened his mouth like he wanted to say more, but Calvin's look, a 62-year-old black man with cracked hands from dirt, slightly hunched back, but eyes sharp as a flashlight, changed his mind. He stepped back, nodded, retreated. And then the little thing started. No one broke the gate. No strangers snuck in at night. No bullets flew. No fires burned. Just a string of nobody's responsible incidents. Mail delivered 2 weeks late. Some boxes opened. Tape torn. One morning, his tomato patch was trampled. Hiking boot prints? Size 11. The shed's security camera turned skyward. No one touched the wires. 2 hens vanished. No blood. Just gone. The compost bin's lid left open. Stinking by noon, though Calvin swore he'd closed it that morning. He called the county sheriff once. A deputy named Lott showed up, still holding a donut. No clear evidence of a crime. Mr. Rourke, could be wildlife. Chickens wander. Chickens that unlock and relock their coop? Lott shrugged. You know how it is. Mrs. Hensley's got friends in the county. Planning office, budget office, you name it. Calvin nodded, saying nothing. He'd learned long ago, when you're a black man in a white suburb, any self-defense can be labeled hostile. And then he saw Gloria on the hill. It was a full moon, bright as a streetlight. Calvin was checking the irrigation system at nearly 3 a.m. after a camera pinged motion near the chicken coop. He moved slowly, flashlight in hand, gravy at his side. From the hill bordering Timberline Estates, he saw a small white shape. He aimed the light, zoomed in with binoculars, and there she was, a golf cart, lights off, parked by the fence, and next to it, Gloria Hensley, clutching a tablet, staring at his land. Calvin switched his phone to record. Captured 30 seconds. Zooming in on her face. The next day, he sent the video to Darren Clay. She's gathering evidence, Darren said. Maybe building a fake case. I think she's scoping to ruin me. Darren just snorted. Welcome to digital age HOAs. The game turned into a match. Calvin played differently now. No lawsuits, no more sheriff calls. Instead, he recorded, taped, photographed, stored everything in the cloud, organized files like a pro journalist. He posted more signs. Continuous surveillance area. Hidden recording devices in use. The cameras were obvious, but hidden always spooked people. Gravy got a GPS collar. The shed got a biometric fingerprint lock. The garden got motion sensors linked to his phone. Then Gloria sent an ultimatum. One morning, the mailman arrived, face taut as a guitar string. He handed Calvin a beige envelope with a bold red stamp. Final notice. Compliance with HO standards required. The letter listed, remove unapproved solar panels. Take down the ancestral land. Not for sale sign for landscape violation. Dismantle the chicken coop for community aesthetic noncompliance. Remove security cameras for causing adjacent residents to feel monitored. Attend the reorientation session next Monday. At the bottom, failure to comply will result in referral to administrative enforcement and county coordination. Calvin read the letter, not angry. He laughed. She wants me gone. And then, like a reflex, he grabbed a pen and wrote under Gloria's signature. I don't belong to your association, and I'm not one to be pushed. He snapped a photo, sent it to Darren, and taped the letter to the shed door, right by the camera. The next day, someone kicked over a planter by his door. Gravy barked fiercely at 2:46 a.m. The camera caught a figure, face unclear, standing by the fence for 3 minutes. Didn't step in, just stared at the house. Calvin started to understand. This wasn't about resident standards anymore. This was a Cold War, fought with paperwork, glares, and toxic silence. But he also understood something else. Abusers of power get more aggressive when their control is threatened. And they get more aggressive when the person they want gone won't leave. An ordinary person, after weeks of harassment, threats, and mind games, might start doubting themselves. Calvin Rourke didn't. At 62, he'd lived through enough to know. When a system wants to erase you, it's not loud, it's polite. It prints papers, and it knocks with a wireless mic. And then, one day, it sets a fire. Another morning, like any other Wednesday, clear skies, light breeze. Calvin woke earlier than usual because Gravy kept growling from 4 a.m. He thought it was a squirrel one, but the dog didn't bark, just growled. Backed up, then advanced. Something was wrong. He dressed, pulled on boots, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. On the hill, the sun hadn't fully risen. A faint purple light spread across the field. He circled the chicken coop, headed toward the shed where the generator sat. And then he smelled it. Smoke. Acrid. Thick with burning plastic. Gravy howled. He ran. Behind the shed, where the large generator stood. Something was smoldering. A black rag protruded from the gas pipe, like a wet wick. Nearby, Duke, the older dog, was tied to a water post. The rope tangled around his legs, the animal thrashing, eyes wild with panic. Calvin rushed over, untied the rope, freed his legs, held him tight like a child. Then he grabbed a bucket, opened the spigot, and doused the generator. The fire hadn't caught yet, but 2 minutes later the rag would have burned, the gas would have exploded, and Duke would have been gone. Calvin knelt in the dirt, hands shaking, chest heaving, the smell of smoke mixing with wet dog. "They trying to burn my whole house down?" he shouted. No one answered. Of course, but he knew this wasn't an accident. This was a declaration of war. The police came, but this time, they were different. Calvin called 911 immediately. Within 12 minutes, 2 squad cars arrived, surprisingly fast. Both were deputy chiefs, Ramirez and Holt. For the first time since moving here, they didn't ask if he was armed. Didn't tell him to stay calm. Didn't flinch when he said, "I suspect sabotage." They listened, took notes. They circled the shed, photographed the scene, measured the distance from the fence to the generator. They asked, "Who'd have a reason to scare you?" Calvin pointed toward Timberline. "The chairwoman, Gloria, and her posse. You know who." Ramirez nodded. No pushback. "Got security cameras?" 8 of them. Night vision, cloud storage. Let us see. Calvin opened his laptop in the kitchen. Scrolled to 8:03:42 a.m. The screen showed a figure, black hoodie, cap, walking along the fence. They crouched by the generator for about 40 seconds. The camera didn't catch their face. But the build, the walk, the hiking boots matched the prints in the trampled tomato patch. Ramirez turned to Holt. Noted. Possible intent? Trespassing. Threat to life. Gloria appeared. But this time, no megaphone. Less than 30 minutes after the police arrived, a small white SUV rolled up, parking outside Calvin's gate. Out stepped Gloria Hensley. No blouse, no golf cart, just khakis, sunglasses, and a beige crossbody bag. She stepped out like she was heading to brunch, not facing accusations of attempted arson. "I'm here to clear up any misunderstandings." Ramirez didn't turn. Holt stared straight. "We haven't confirmed anything, but Mr. Rourke has video, and someone tried to torch a generator next to a tied-up dog. What kind of misunderstanding is that?" Gloria's lips tightened. "We've received complaints about inappropriate behavior." "On land not under your jurisdiction?" Calvin stepped forward, eyes blazing. "My dog nearly died, my generator nearly blew, and you've got the nerve to show up?" "I didn't order any fires," she said quietly. "But you have to understand, your defiance creates an unsafe feeling for the community." Calvin laughed. Not joyfully. The laugh of someone who's heard the same tune so often it's nauseating. "Unsafe? Because I live without your permission? Because I won't pay your damn association fees?" "Because you don't understand the rules," she muttered. "I understand the law. The real law. Not the one you print in your office." Ramirez cut in. "Mrs. Hensley, if you're not involved, I suggest you leave. Otherwise, we'll note you as obstructing an investigation." For the first time, Gloria didn't argue. She looked at Calvin, her eyes cold. "You'll regret not cooperating." "I've regretted staying silent before." "Not anymore." Calvin replied. She turned, got in her SUV, and drove off, leaving dust and unspoken threats behind. The lawyer takes the stage. That afternoon, Darren Clay arrived. Linen shirt, folder in hand, face grim. "You okay?" "I'm alive. Dogs are too. Generators, fine for now." Darren got to the point. "We've got everything, cameras, witnesses, threatening letters, and now an act that could be attempted murder by explosive. I'm sending it all to the county DA. Is it enough?" "Not yet, but enough to start exposing this game." Calvin looked out at the hill. Sunlight slanted through the junipers, hitting the shed's smoke-stained roof. Duke rested in the shade, gravy glued to his side. He lit a cigarette, though he hadn't smoked in months. "She didn't do this alone." Darren nodded. "I think so too. I handled an HOA case in Fort Worth. There's a group behind it called the Development Preservation Fund. Sounds noble, but it's all about funding lawsuits to push poor folks off valuable land. Gloria's got backing? Definitely. That night, Calvin didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, lights off, rifle across his lap, gravy at his feet. He wasn't waiting for anyone, but he wasn't letting himself be caught off guard anymore. And in the dead of night, he whispered, "Grandpa, I get it now. They're the same as back then. Still want our land. Still want us silent. But now, I've got something you didn't have. I've got evidence. And the internet. In modern warfare, you don't always need a weapon in hand. Sometimes a camera, stable Wi-Fi, and the right story at the right time are enough." Calvin Rourke understood this as he sat in his kitchen, cold coffee on the table, staring at his computer screen. On it, an 18-minute, 24-second video titled in all caps, "They tried to burn my house down because I'm not in their HOA." The video opened with dim night camera footage. A figure in a black hoodie crossed the fence, crouching by the generator. Cut to smoke billowing after the fire was doused. Calvin holding a trembling Duke. Gloria Hensley standing by her SUV as police told her to leave. And finally, Calvin looking straight into the camera, voice slow, steady. "No need to shout. My name is Calvin Rourke. I'm 62. I'm a retired contractor, a black man living on land my grandfather was forced off in 1963. I'm not in any HOA, but they came anyway. They sent threatening letters, played dirty tricks, and then tried to burn my house, with my dog tied up nearby. I'm not telling this to complain. I'm telling it because I know I'm not the first, and if I don't speak up, I won't be the last." The video was posted by a YouTube channel, Civil Watch DeKex, run by an independent journalist, Nia Kelly, a black woman from Houston who'd left local papers to investigate HOA violations in Texas. Nia got an email from Darren. Subject line simple: "Hot story, got footage, got names, got threats." She watched the video in one long breath. Damn, this is gold. Video launch day, Friday, 6:32 p.m. Texas time. 4 hours, 24,000 views. 12 hours, 98,000 views. 24 hours, 376,000 views. Trending on Reddit's ER public freakout. Comments: "I live near Timberline. Gloria threatened to sue me over a scarecrow facing the wrong way. This is too familiar. HOAs are turning into private mini-governments. This isn't a violation. This is local terrorism. I worked for an HOA board. Quit after seeing them stalk residents with drones. Not kidding." Calvin sat at the screen, eyes no longer tired, no longer alone. They wanted me quiet, but now I'm reaching half of America. 3 days after the video, someone knocked on his door. A woman. Curly hair, light brown skin, round glasses, faded floral shirt, hesitant gestures. "I'm Alondra Martinez. I used to work for Timberline HOA's internal team. I saw the video, and I've got something." She opened her bag, pulling out a small black USB in a carefully folded brown envelope. "I kept these files when I left the association. I knew someone would need them someday." The USB contained emails between Gloria and a group called Regional Compliance Circle, discussing soft land use conversion for non-HOA areas, a list of non-compliant zones, Tier 3 targets, clearly stating Rourke Acres to be addressed before Q3. Drone photos of Calvin, his chicken coop, his kitchen window. A spreadsheet titled Unofficial Enforcement Costs, Q2, are handling. An invitation from Gloria to a private security firm. Falcon Shield Services, requesting unmarked civilian personnel for nighttime operations. Calvin went quiet. "They hired people to scare me." Alondra nodded, hands clenched. "I couldn't stay. I've backed up the USB to Google Drive and sent it to my lawyer. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. Calvin took her hand. His eyes reddened, but his voice stayed firm. You did a brave thing, and I won't let it go to waste. Darren submitted the files to the county DA, along with Alondra's data. Attached was a request for an emergency restraining order against Gloria and any Timberline HOA personnel regarding Calvin's property. They also sent a case summary with photos to 3 local papers: the Timberline Tribune, Houston Current, the Texas Civil Ledger, and the unexpected, major media joined in. CNN U.S. Affairs section posted an online story. 62-year-old man targeted by local HOA nearly lost home for not joining. MSNBC invited Nia Kelly for an interview. Calvin didn't appear live but sent a thank you video, saying one line, "I'm not trying to be famous. I'm just trying to live without being chased off the land my grandfather was chased off." The HOA's response. Right after. Calvin received a letter with a red seal from Timberline HOA's law firm. Subject: Investigation Notice regarding community safety disruption and psychological pressure on HOA personnel. The letter accused Calvin of causing emotional distress to Gloria, creating a hostile atmosphere for HOA staff, spreading misinformation online, inciting negative public reactions that could lead to violence. Calvin laughed dryly at that line. They're playing the victim card. He called Nia. You free? I want to shoot a new video. Second video, title: After I spoke out, they said I'm threatening them. They called me a security risk. Calvin read the letter on camera, then walked to the chicken coop. He showed the camera the coop, broken gate, burn marks, smoke-stained walls. Then he faced the lens. This is my coop, where they nearly burned my dog alive. And now they say I'm threatening them? When the weak stand up to the strong, the first thing the strong do is call the weak dangerous. The second video outdid the first. In 2 days, 900,000 views, spread across Twitter, X, TikTok, with lawyers and activists chiming in. A group of UT Austin law students sent an open letter. We're ready to provide free legal support to anyone threatened by Timberline HOA in the past. And like a dam breaking, it wasn't just Calvin's fight anymore. Calvin Rourke stood at his wooden kitchen table, a coffee-stained map spread before him. In his hand, a piece of paper, tucked inside a black box left on his doorstep the night before. No sender, no address, just one block letter sentence. You're not the last, just the first. Attached was a hand-drawn map. 5 red X's, one marked his farm. Next to it, the number 5. The other 4 X's were scattered around Timberline County. No names, just numbers and vague locations near trails or non-HOA land. Calvin lit a cigarette, a habit he only touched when his gut screamed something bigger than he could imagine. They're not just after me. Self-appointed mission, find the other X's. Calvin didn't wait for the sheriff or count on the press. He printed the map, traced possible routes, and called Darren. I'm going. I need to know what they did to the others. Not safe to go alone, Darren replied. If I don't go, I won't have anything left to protect. Stop. 1. A gate locked with rusty chains. The first coordinates led to Pine Hollow, a 45-minute drive from Rourke Acres, a 12-acre abandoned farm, grass knee-high. A crooked sign hung on the gate. Brooks Goat Farm, Est, 1980. Calvin got out, called out. No answer. The gate was chained shut. Inside, the main house had broken windows, a collapsed porch, no signs of life. Wind whistled through old pines, sounding like someone breathing through their throat. Near the fence, he saw a handwritten sign in white paint. Foreclosed by county order. Do not trespass. Under a large tree, carved with a knife. They said I devalued the area. They stole my goats. C. B. Calvin snapped a photo. A chill ran through him. And stop on the woman named Velma. The second coordinates led to a small yellow house in a narrow valley, surrounded by a white painted wooden fence. An old brass bell hung on the gate. Calvin rang it. A black woman, over 50, opened the door. Face gaunt, but eyes bright. You, Mr. Rourke? Yes, I think I'm number 5. You're number 2. She paused for a few seconds, then opened the gate. In her kitchen, Calvin shared his story. The drone, Gloria, the coupe, the USB, the video, the anonymous letter that led him here. Velma listened without interrupting, just nodded. Then she spoke. I rehabilitate wild horses. Had 12. Last year, a man named Alan Hensley came. Said he was with the HOA's expansion team. Asked if I'd sell to restore a regional ecological corridor. I refused. A week later, I got a fine. A month later, 2 horses died. Antifreeze in their water trough. Sheriff said I must have stored it wrong. No one was arrested. No investigation. Then I got an anonymous letter. One line. Don't stand in the way of progress. Land doesn't care who you are. Calvin went silent. He didn't dare ask more. But Velma's eyes didn't waver. If you need me in court, I'll go. If you need a witness, I've got photos, receipts, records. They thought I was alone, but now I know I'm not. Calvin nodded. They clasped hands. No promises. But the trust between marked people needed no words. Stop Ottawa 3. A charred ghost. The third stop was an old trailer in a field by a forest edge. No people, no sounds. The roof was blackened, the door blown open, like an explosion had hit. Nearby, a tin shed, now just a frame. On the charred wall, someone had drawn in charcoal. Won't sell, won't leave. Die here. On the ground, Calvin saw children's toys, a fleece-lined glove, a small rubber boot. He didn't film, didn't photograph. Just bowed his head. Stop Yin 4. The mother and the burned photo. The fourth farm sat near Timberline's eastern edge. A red-brown house. Flower garden out front. Wind chimes on the porch. The owner, Vanessa Keene. 41, single mom with twin boys. Invited Calvin in. Poured mint tea. Asked little. I got an anonymous letter 3 months ago. After I refused to sell to a regional ecological development group. Same P.O. box as Timberline HOA. Then my power went out 3 nights in a row. Security cameras disabled. One night, someone threw a glass bottle of burning trash into my garage. The fire started. I put it out in time. Sheriff said, kids being kids. She showed Calvin a photo, her boys in front of a chicken coop. The angle was off, clearly taken by a drone from afar. I don't know who they are, but I know one thing. They're not doing this for the community. Before Calvin left, Vanessa handed him a yellowed paper, as if hidden at the bottom of a drawer for years. In red ink, handwritten, the other guy didn't leave, so now he's gone. Dated 0609. Calvin gripped the paper. That was tomorrow. Back to connect the pieces. At Rourke Acres, Calvin taped the map to the wall. 4 locations, 4 stories, with one common thread. Refused to sell, threatened, sabotaged, silenced. He called Darren, sent all recordings, photos, witness statements. Darren said one thing, they're not just an HOA anymore, they're a system. Calvin opened his laptop, created a new folder. Leap Suspects, Doc Package, Land Expansion and Acquisition Project, the name from Alondra's USB. He named the files. Target Brooks Abandoned, Target Velma Testimony, Target Trailer Unknown Victim, Target Keen Threat Note. Target Rourke case lead. 5 X's, a web, 1 day left. 0609, the deadline on the threatening note. That night, as Calvin checked the cameras one last time, an alert popped up. Motion at northern fence. Camera 6. He opened the feed. A figure, black hoodie again, walked along the boundary, carrying a long, flat tool, maybe a measuring rod or stake. Calvin flooded the yard with light, blaring the outdoor speaker. "You're on private property. Stop now." The figure didn't stop, just planted a small red stake in the ground, then vanished. Next to the stake, a plastic sign with a logo. MESA Development Initiative, Phase 2. Surveying. Calvin snapped a photo. Called Darren that night. "They're starting Phase 2. I think tomorrow's going to be big." "They think you'll sit still." "They're wrong," Calvin said, eyes piercing the dark. "Tomorrow I'll make them show their face." 6:09. 5 a.m. Calvin Rourke didn't sleep. Didn't expect anything good to happen today either. He stood on his porch, coffee in hand, eyes on the east, where the first light slowly touched the land his grandfather lost to the county. Now the land he guarded with every fence post, every blade of grass. At his feet, Gravy lay still, ears perked. In the distance, the infrared sensors along the fence hadn't flashed red yet. But Calvin felt something coming. "They'll pick early morning. Like thieves, like soldiers, like themselves," he muttered. 0632. Alarm triggers camera. 3, north side. Sensor activated. Camera 6, motion detected. Someone's there. Calvin opened the laptop screen. 3 people. Jackets, caps, carrying survey tools. One had a large backpack. One was Gloria. No trace of the polite civilian woman. She wore black. No makeup. No HOA badge. Holding a thick folder, twice the size of a USB drive. Calvin hit speed dial. "Darren, they're here." "On my way. Got the package." "Anything else?" DA's office, reporter, and a search warrant for the HOA office. 0647. The confrontation begins. Calvin opened the gate, stepped out, no gun, just a camera. He started recording, aiming straight at the group crossing his property line. "Stop. This is private land. None of you have the right to survey here." A man in a baseball cap stepped forward. "We're from MESA Development. This is a designated expansion zone. State approved." Calvin cut him off. "I've got records proving this land isn't HOA, isn't zoned for development. And I've got a restraining order against Gloria Hensley, who's standing 12 feet from me." The camera panned to Gloria. "Don't make this harder, Mr. Rourke," she said coldly. "Think about the region's future. You're an obstacle." Calvin smiled, not kindly. "If I'm an obstacle, you're a bulldozer. And I've got papers to stop bulldozers." 07 Zoyer. Darren Clay arrives. The lawyer stepped out, dressed simply but carrying a thick folder. Behind him, 2 others, a reporter from Texas Ledger and a rep from the Timberline County DA's office. Sheriff's deputies arrived less than 3 minutes later. No sirens, no weapons, but with a warrant. Deputy Ramirez stepped forward. "Mrs. Gloria Hensley, you're ordered to cease all civilian activities related to Timberline land until the investigation is complete. We have a warrant to search the HOA office for suspected illegal coercion, property trespass, organized threats, and misuse of HOA funds." Gloria gave a faint laugh. "This is a farce. Then you'll have a chance to perform at trial." At the HOA office, Ionai Nasua's reporters, deputies, prosecutors, all there. The HOA building was small but built like a state-level law firm. Icy AC. Neat files. Deputies entered the storage room. They found 3 burner phones, 2 encrypted external hard drives, a list, non-compliant zone, Phase 1 completed, an unpublished zoning map, LEAP Phase 2, integration map, a contract with Falcon Shield, a Houston-based private security firm, an internal PR plan. If hit with media attacks, pivot to community disruption, member threats, divisiveness. The final betrayer? Alan Hensley, Gloria's cousin. Before leaving the office, Calvin got a text. Alan arrested in Mississippi. Fake papers, carrying satellite images, handwritten notes, and a photo of you sleeping on your porch. Calvin stood still for a moment. They really treated me like a project to eliminate, not a person. A week later, press conference. Calvin sat beside Darren with Velma, Vanessa, and Alondra nearby. Behind them, a banner. We won't stay silent anymore. Calvin didn't give a speech, just a short statement. They thought we'd be scared. They thought colored folks can't sue. They thought people living alone have no one to stand with. But this land has memory, and it remembers who bled for it. Consequences for Gloria and her crew. Gloria faced 6 charges, including conspiracy to commit arson, violating a restraining order, and illegal drone surveillance. Timberline HOA was suspended indefinitely. Falcon Shield faced a federal investigation for ties to multiple regional HOAs. And Calvin Rourke? He stayed at Rourke Acres, added more cameras, replanted his tomatoes, received an invitation from Texas Southern University to speak on land rights. One day, while cleaning the shed, he found an old sign, his grandfather's handwritten board from the forced eviction. This land I tilled, no paper can take it from my hands. He put it back up, right at the main gate. Below it, he hung a smaller sign, and now it belongs to his grandson.